Not one has been convicted of anything to do with the reason why Guantanamo was set in the first place, September the 11th. Eventually, after 2 years of in detention without trial and 2 years of isolation in a cell that measured 8 foot by 6 foot, where I had no contact with any other human being other than the prison guards and the soldiers, I was released to my family and went back home. It's never been explained to me what it is that I did to the Americans. And still, there are 220 people held over there. But I just want to tell you this. This war on terror, as it was launched under the name of Operation Enduring Freedom, in fact it should have been called Operation End Your Freedom, because that would have made much more sense, at least to people like me. But if you look at, and this is the crux of the matter, if you read George Orwell, in Animal Farm he says, everybody is equal. Everyone is equal. You know the story. But some people are more equal than others. 2,976 people died on September the 11th. Remember this number. This number is available to you if you want to look at it, because every single individual who died tragically, horribly and wrongfully that day is accounted for. He is a human being. He has a value to the single digit. Is there anyone here, statistician, politician, statesman or individual, that can tell me how many people died in the first week alone of Operation Enduring Freedom? No. Nobody knows because nobody cares, and here's the pun, because nobody counts. Not the dead and not the ones who killed them. How many people have died in Iraq and Afghanistan and in the proxy wars that have been waged in Somalia or in Palestine or in Lebanon? It doesn't matter. 2,976 people versus an untold number. And we're told that somehow this is justified. What gives me hope here today, and what I've seen over the past few days, and hopefully inshallah over the next couple of days, is that there is a movement here, and a movement particularly in Malaysia, a place that is such an example for the rest of the world. Particularly coming from England, where there is a large Muslim population, where there is a large population of African Caribbeans and so forth, and yet people are cloistered and divided. And what you see here, what I see in front of me, is a community of people that, as was said before, elsewhere in the world they're at each other's throats. But something's happened here, something's been done here, and clearly in front of me is a man who's been one of the most instrumental in doing that the world can take a lesson from. There's one thing that I'd like to tell you that I took a lesson from. When I was in Guantanamo Bay, and again the other people will testify to this, it would be incorrect and unjust to say that everyone is a torturer, everyone is a bigot, everyone is a racist. There's a verse in the Quran that says, "O you who believe, stand up as witnesses for Allah and for justice, and do not let your animosity of a people cause you to do them an injustice." Why? Because they are not your teacher. Your oppressor cannot become your teacher. And so for us, I remember there were several guards, soldiers, and even interrogators who came and spoke to us as human beings and did things for us that would have normally had them thrown out the army had they known. One of those people came over to the UK recently, and we toured together, Jailer and Jailed. We'd called it the tour of two sides, one story. And of course, he spoke out about what he'd been demonized to do himself. He had been programmed as a young 17, 18-year-old to go out and deal with these terrorists, so-called people. And by the way, I have to tell you that President Bush, in only the way President Bush could say, said that I don't know what these folk have done, but I know they're the worst of the worst. President Bush designated us as the world's most dangerous men, when in fact, he was the world's most dangerous man. In fact, what he did and the legacy that he has left has brought about more death and destruction in the past 2 decades than anyone else has done. And that's why it's so important, that's why it's so pivotal to ensure that this War Crimes Tribunal takes place, that it has a knock-on effect, that it has a domino effect. And there's one thing that I would like to ask and suggest is that it comes to the United Kingdom of Great Britain, and I would be the foremost person in promoting it and showing people what it's like and what it's about, but also to make a push and determination that it gets presented in the US, in the very heart of the USA itself. Because only then, once people walk into it, I just did an interview, by the way, with somebody from Time magazine about this whole thing, and he asked me this question. He said, don't you think that what this exhibition has inside of it is a little bit too much, a little bit inflated? And my response to him was that the only people who would think that it's a little bit inflated or a little bit too much are those who have never experienced it. In fact, what you see in there, and my Iraqi brothers and Palestinian brothers know better, what you see in there is not even a fraction of what their lives have been affected by. And finally, I just want to say one thing, well, two things actually. One is that, as Muhammad Umar said earlier on, is that you have to, after hearing all of this, after seeing all of this, if you don't become active, if you do nothing, then silence is tacit approval. Silence is tacit approval. Why? Because we know when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he saw something wrong, he changed it. And we know from the Sunnah that if he let something happen in front of him, it was approval. So the question when everybody, I was extremely disappointed that people's hands didn't shoot up and rocket up. It's imperative, my brothers and sisters and friends, whoever you are and wherever you're from, that you get engaged in what's taking place, that you support the organizations here. And what you have here is the support of in essence, the country. We are from places where you're turned away from everyone. People look at you and they call you a Muslim and a fundamentalist and a terrorist and a foreigner and a blackie and all sorts of things. And yet we struggle in the middle of that. We stand firm in the middle of that, even after what we've been through, especially after what we've been through. So I call upon you to stand firm. This is not the time for cowards. This is not the time for being afraid or meek. This is the time for courage. And if there's one thing that I learned from all of the Guantanamo prisoners, who have much more courage than I have, is their steadfastness, is their courage, is their ability to stand up for their dignity. And there's one thing that I would like to ask of Malaysia. The 220 Guantanamo people that still exist, of the 220, there are a number, around 40 or so, who cannot return to their countries. Now you may have seen in that presentation pictures of children. One of the children holding up a banner saying, I have never met my father. That child is 8 years old. 8 years old. He's never seen his father. He doesn't know what it's like to have a father. When he goes to school and children ask him, what does your father do? He says, my dad's in prison. And what would they think then? They would think, well, your dad must be a really bad man. How is that child going to explain to other children that there is a place called Guantanamo where the bad men are the ones that are running the place? And so what I ask of Malaysia is that, is that there are a number of people who can't return to their countries. Palestinians primarily, but there are others, Libyans and so forth, that they be given refuge in this place. A place that they could feel comfortable and safe. Portugal has done it. Ireland has done it. Sweden is doing it. Other countries who have really no relation other than a general human feeling towards these people. So I ask of the Malaysian people to please accept these people into your embrace. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you very much.